She stepped aboard because the gangway matched the description. That was the full extent of it. No instinct, no sign, no particular arrangement of the evening conspiring toward anything. The charter company had said berth 14, a white yacht. Gangway with a blue rope rail, boarding at 7. It was berth 14. It was white. The gangway had a blue rope rail. It was 7 minutes past 7, and she was late. And the deckhand at the top had waved her aboard with the easy gesture of someone who had been expecting someone to arrive, and she had climbed the gangway with her, weekend bag on her shoulder and her sunscreen already applied because she burned easily, and the Gulf of Thailand was not interested in her schedule. She was 3 steps onto the deck before she understood something was wrong. Wrong was the scale of it. The charter boat she had booked for the Koh Samui trip, a birthday present she had given herself for her 33rd, saved for in the specific disciplined way of someone who spent 10 months of every year managing a classroom budget, and 2 months recovering from the previous 10, had been described as a comfortable mid-size vessel accommodating up to 8 guests. Comfortable mid-size vessels accommodating up to 8 guests did not have a main deck the length of her school's gymnasium. They did not have a crew of 5 visible from the gangway alone. They did not have the specific quality of material silence that certain places had when everything in them had been chosen with absolute precision and no expense had participated in any discussion about it. She turned to go back down the gangway. The boat next to us left 20 minutes ago. She turned. He was standing at the far end of the deck, in the particular posture of someone who had been there long enough to have established it as his position. Unhurried, not performing the absence of hurry, simply occupying the space the way people did when space was something they had always had enough of. He was holding a glass with something amber in it, and he was looking at her with the level, curious attention of someone who had just witnessed something unexpected and found it more interesting than what had preceded it. "The Serenity Blue," he said. "Charter vessel. Berth 14. He looked briefly toward the water beyond the stern. They departed early. Weather window. She turned and looked at berth 14, which was now occupied by the reflection of berth 15's lights on dark water. "My bag is here," she said. It was the first fully coherent thought she produced. "Yes," he said. "My shoes are here," she said. She had taken them off at the top of the gangway because there had been a small sign, and she had followed the small sign out of the habit of someone who followed rules, because rules were usually there for a reason. Her shoes were in a neat pair beside the sign. "Also, yes," he said. She looked at him. She looked at the yacht. She looked at the shoes. She made the rapid assessment of someone who had been problem-solving inside limited resources for long enough to have become genuinely skilled at it. "I need to contact the charter company," she said. "If you'll excuse me." She pulled out her phone and found 4 bars and the charter company's number and called it and stood on the deck of someone else's yacht in her bare feet listening to it ring. It rang 11 times. She counted. It went to voicemail in Thai and then in English, and she left a message that was polite and specific, which was how she left all messages, and then she called the second number on the booking confirmation. And that one did not ring at all, and she looked at her phone, and then at the water where berth 14 was not. The man was still standing at the far end of the deck. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm going to figure this out in a moment. I just need..." She scrolled through the booking confirmation looking for a third number and found only an email address. "Where were they taking you?" he said. "The Northern Bay." "There's a snorkeling site." She looked up. "I'm sorry, I haven't introduced myself." "Jiangsu. I teach secondary school in Seoul, and I have apparently boarded the wrong yacht." He crossed the deck toward her. Not quickly. with the even pace of someone who had decided to cover a distance and was covering it. Park Hyun-woo, he said. He said it without the particular weight that people sometimes placed under their name when they expected the name to do something, which she noted and filed alongside the deck and the silence and the amber glass. I know the Northern Bay, he said. We pass it. She looked at him. Where are you going? Koh Tao, he said. Tonight. We pass the Northern Bay at approximately 9:30 if we leave within the hour. She processed this. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, he said. I'm offering. She looked at the gangway, which was still there, which meant leaving was still an option, which meant staying was a choice she would be making with information rather than by default. She looked at her shoes by the sign. She looked at the dock, which had no Serenity Blue in berth 14 and no visible alternative, and a charter company with 11 rings and a voicemail. The Northern Bay, she said. You would drop me there. At 9:30, he said. There's a pier. I'll have a tender take you in. She thought about the money she had saved for 10 months, and the birthday she had given herself, and the snorkeling site she had read about in 4 separate places, all of which had described it with the specific reverence of people who had seen something they were still not over. Thank you, she said. I'll stay out of the way. You don't need to stay out of the way, he said. Sit wherever you want. She sat at the stern, because the stern had a view of the water opening up as they left the harbor, which was the view she had come for. The crew moved with the quiet efficiency of people who knew the boat well enough that their work had become invisible, and she watched the lights of the harbor organize themselves into the distance and felt the particular unwinding that happened when you got onto water, which was not the same as any land-based relaxing and could not be replicated by any amount of deliberately taken rest on solid ground. He came to the stern at 8 o'clock with 2 glasses and set one on the rail beside her and took the other and sat in the chair to her left, not quite adjacent, not quite distant, the natural distance of 2 people who were not yet calibrated to each other. Secondary school, he said. What subject? History, she said. And social studies. Same students for both. Usually, she looked at the water. I have 31 students this year. I've had the same homeroom class for 3 years running, which is unusual, but our school has a continuity program. What does that do? He said. The continuity. She looked at him briefly. It was not the polite question, the one people asked when they wanted to seem interested in an answer they were not going to retain. It had the specific quality of a question asked because the asker actually wanted to know. It means I know them, she said. Not just their academic performance, their family situations, their weak spots, the subjects they're embarrassed about not understanding yet. It means when something's wrong, I usually know before they say it. She held her glass. It matters most in the 3rd year. By then they trust me enough to ask for help with the real problems. What are the real problems? He said. She thought about this year's 31, their specific and varied configurations of difficulty. The ones who were brilliant and knew it, and the ones who were brilliant and had no idea. The ones who were working through things that had nothing to do with history and everything to do with being 16 and in a world that had not yet shown them they were capable of navigating it. Mostly the gap, she said, between who they think they're supposed to be and who they actually are. History helps with that, oddly. When you understand that most of the people who changed anything significant started without permission, it recalibrates what you think you're allowed to do. He was quiet for a moment. The boat moved smoothly through water that was dark and lit at its surface by the moon. You teach that on purpose, he said. That specific thing. That specific thing is the reason I teach the rest of it, she said. He looked at the water. She looked at the water. Somewhere in the distance, a light moved across the horizon, and she tracked it for a while without needing to know what it was. "What do you do?" she said. He told her. Not in the compressed, performance-ready summary that people with significant things to say about their professional lives usually produced, but in the actual version, the shipping logistics company his father had built. The decade he had spent trying to decide whether to take it over or build something separate, and the eventual understanding that the question was false, that it was not either or, that he had rebuilt it from inside it into something neither of them had originally envisioned. Hyun-woo said this last part without the pride that usually accompanied such statements, which made it more credible. "The recalibration," she said, "of what you were allowed to do." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "Exactly that." "How long did it take?" "Longer than it should have," he said. "I had a very fixed picture of what taking over my father's company meant, what it required me to be. I held that picture for 4 years past the point where I should have put it down." "What changed?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone deciding what version to give, the quiet of someone actually reaching back. "A conversation," he said, "with someone who had no investment in what I decided. They just asked what I would build if I weren't building what I thought I was supposed to. And I answered without thinking, and the answer was the company I actually wanted. And then I had to admit I had known that for 4 years and had been choosing the fixed picture instead, because the fixed picture was safer." She held her glass and thought about 31 students and the gap between who they thought they were supposed to be and who they actually were, and thought about how the gap never fully closed, just got smaller in increments each time someone had the right conversation, at the right moment. "The person who asked," she said. "Do they know it changed things?" "I don't think so," he said. "It was not a dramatic conversation. It was dinner, I think. I don't think they knew they'd done anything." "That's most of the good ones," she said. He looked at her with the quality of attention she had been aware of since she stepped on deck, and had been calibrating her estimates of since. Not the attention of someone performing interest, but the kind that cost something, the kind that changed the shape of the person paying it. "Do you know when you've done it?" he said. "With your students?" "Rarely in the moment," she said. "Sometimes they come back and tell me. More often I find out through someone else, years later. One of my students from my first year is an urban planner now. She sent me a message last year. She said a lesson about the demolition of old Seoul neighborhoods in the 70s was the reason she chose her field. She looked at the water. I remember that lesson. I thought it didn't land. Half of them were asleep. He made a sound that might have been a laugh, not performed. Brief. The involuntary kind. The ones you think didn't land, he said, are often the ones, she said. 9:30 arrived, and with it the Northern Bay, which was exactly what 4 separate descriptions written by people who were still not over it had promised. A curve of dark water backed by hills, with the moon making a path across the surface toward nothing in particular. The kind of view that made you understand why people organized their entire holidays around arriving at specific coordinates, at specific times. She stood at the bow and looked at it while the tender was prepared, and she held the full quality of her attention on it, because she had learned to do that, to be entirely present in the places that deserved it, which was a skill she had also been trying to teach for 11 years with varying results. "Sew in," he said from behind her. She turned. He was standing at the bow with the same posture he had had when she'd first seen him, settled, present, not performing anything. "The charter company," he said. "I looked them up while you were at the stern. They've had 3 complaints filed in the last 6 months for early departures without proper passenger notification. You should file a 4th. She stared at him. "You looked them up." "I wanted to know if it was a pattern or an error," he said. "It's a pattern." She thought about the voicemail she had left that was polite and specific. She thought about 10 months of classroom budget management and the specific arithmetic of a saved birthday gift. "Thank you," she said. "I'll file it." "I'll send you the complaints database link," he said. "It's not easy to find." "You have my number," she said. "I will if you give it to me," he said. She gave it to him. He sent the link immediately, which was a kind of response she appreciated, the doing of the thing at the time of the saying rather than the later which never came. The tender took her in. She stood at the pier and looked back at the yacht, lit against the dark water. And then she looked at the bay and the moon's path across it, and then she took off her shoes for the second time that evening and walked down to the water's edge and stood in the specific cold of it and let herself have the full experience of arriving at the exact right place through a sequence of events that had been entirely wrong. He texted at 11. She was in the small guest house she had found after 20 minutes of walking from the pier, lying on top of the blanket with the window open and the sounds of the island coming through it. The text said, "The complaints form is the third link on the page. It requires your booking confirmation number. I hope the bay was worth the wrong boat." She looked at the text for a moment. She thought about the deck and the amber glass and the question about the continuity program asked with the quality of someone who actually wanted the answer. She thought about the fixed picture held 4 years past the point of putting it down and the dinner conversation that had changed things without knowing it had changed them. She typed. The bay was worth considerably more than the right boat. 3 dots. Then, good. Then, after a pause, I'll be in Seoul in the first week of October. There's a talk at the National Museum on maritime heritage routes. I think you'd have opinions about it. She looked at the ceiling of the guest house with the island sounds coming through the window. She thought about opinions. She had a number of them, consistently, about most things, and had spent 11 years in a classroom learning that the opinions were most useful when they were offered in the direction of a conversation rather than a conclusion. She typed, "I would have opinions about it." The response came quickly. "I'll send you the details." She put the phone on the blanket beside her. Outside, the island was doing what islands did at midnight, quietly, without requiring anything from her. She thought about berth 14 and the gangway with the blue rope rail and the small sign where she had left her shoes. And she thought about the ways the wrong door kept opening into the right room. And she thought that 11 years of teaching history had given her, among other things, a long view of the way things that appeared to be accidents revealed themselves, in retrospect, to have been vectors. She was not drawing conclusions. She was noting the data. The bay had been worth it. The conversation had been worth it. The October talk at the National Museum was 3 months away, and she had opinions prepared in advance, and a window open, and an island making its midnight sounds, and she was 33 years old, and had given herself the right birthday after all. She closed her eyes. Outside, the water did what water always did. Moved, regardless, toward wherever it was going next.